All right, so we're going to pick up with the book of Acts, chapter 27. And so this is where, if we remember, Paul has gone on his journeys. He's been kicked out of towns. He's been stoned and left outside for dead, gotten up and walked back in boldly. He has had people come for him in the night, and they lower him out the windows to keep him safe. But then he got to the point where he started a riot because he cost some men their means of making money, their livelihood, by casting demon out of a young girl and freeing her from the bondage of that demonic possession. And so she lost her ability to tell the future, and they brought charges that he was stirring the people up. And he went before Felix and before Agrippa, and they could release him. They were hoping that Paul would give him a little bribe. And they even said there's no grounds here for the death that the Jews are calling for. But Paul didn't say, "You're right, it's groundless, let me go." He said, "I'm a Roman citizen and I appeal to Caesar," which automatically throws him into the Supreme Court now. He's going. And so that's where we pick up. So when it was decided that we would sail for Italy, Paul and some other prisoners were handed over to a certain centurion named Julius, who belonged to the imperial regiment. He is one of Caesar's guardsmen. He's right there answering directly to Caesar. We boarded a ship from Adramyttium, about to sail for ports along the coast of the province of Asia, and we put out to sea. Aristarchus, a Macedonian from Thessalonica, was with us. The next day we landed at Sidon, and Julius, in his kindness to Paul, allowed him to go to his friends so that they might provide for his needs. Now imagine this, you're a federal prisoner, right? So I'm putting this into terms that we can understand. So here you've got a federal prisoner who's been accused basically of sedition. And as they're transporting him, they're driving him from Oklahoma City to Seattle, Washington, and they stop for the night in Provo, Utah. And they go, "Okay, so I know you're a federal prisoner, but your friends can come and pick you up and take care of you for tonight and give you some food and some clean clothes." That's basically what they did. So Paul has this opportunity mid-journey to meet with people and to encourage them in what they're doing and to be refreshed through that community as well. They can give him fresh food, they can give him clean clothes, and make sure that he's doing well and lifting his spirits. From there, we put out to sea again and passed to the lee of Cyprus because the winds were against us. When we had sailed across the open sea off the coast of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we landed at Myra in Lycia. There the centurion found an Alexandrian ship sailing for Italy and put us on board. We made slow headway for many days and had difficulty arriving off of Cnidus. When the wind did not allow us to hold our course, we sailed to the lee of Crete, opposite of Salmone. We moved along the coast with difficulty and came to a place called Fair Havens, near the town of Lasea. Much time had been lost, and sailing had already become dangerous because by now it was after the Day of Atonement. So Paul warned them. So they're coming into a season where the storms are ramping up. And any sailing along the coastlines at this time is going to be fraught with danger because those winds and the waves can come and wash them ashore very quickly or rush them out to sea where they can be lost. Paul says, "Men, I can see that our voyage is going to be disastrous and bring a great deal of loss to ship and cargo and to our own lives also." But the centurion, instead of listening to what Paul said, followed the advice of the pilot and the owner of the ship. Since the harbor was unsuitable to winter in, the majority decided that we should sail on, hoping to reach Phoenix and winter there. This was a harbor in Crete facing both southwest and northwest. When a gentle wind began to blow, they saw their opportunity, so they weighed anchor and sailed across the shore of Crete. Before very long, a wind of hurricane force called the Northeaster swept down from the island. The ship was caught by the storm and could not head into the wind, so we gave way to it and were driven along. So for those big ships, all they have to move is their sails, right? They can redirect their sails and a giant rudder that kind of sort of works. That's all they've got. And it only works when you're going forward, because when you're going backwards, it's like driving a forklift. You're steering at the wrong end. As we passed to the lee of a small island called Cauda, we were hardly able to make lifeboats secure. So the men hoisted it aboard. Then they passed ropes under the ship to hold it together because they were afraid they would run aground on the sandbars of Syrtis. They lowered the sea anchor and let the ship be driven along. So those ships at that time were shaped wood that were held together with tar and pitch. And so as they hit things, the boards come loose and start to separate, and water comes into the cargo hold and boards fly off. That's why they ran those ropes underneath, so that they could try and tie everything across and hold it secure. But if you're not familiar with rope, when it gets wet, what does it do? It expands. So you're constantly tightening them up. But as the top of it dries, it begins to shrink. So you have to be very careful, because you could tighten it, and if you forget to let it out a little bit at a time, as it shrinks, it can crush the hull from the top. We took such a violent battering from the storm that the next day they began to throw cargo overboard. On the third day, they threw the ship's tackle overboard with their own hand. When neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, and the storm continued raging, we finally gave up all hope of being saved. After they had gone a long time without food, Paul stood up before them and said, "Men, you should have taken my advice not to sail from Crete. Then you would have spared yourselves this damage and loss. But now I urge you, keep up your courage, because not one of you will be lost, only the ship will be destroyed. Last night, an angel of the God to whom I belong and whom I serve stood beside me and said, 'Do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand trial before Caesar, and God has graciously given you the lives of all who sail with you. So keep up your courage, men, for I have faith in the God that it will happen just as he told me. Nevertheless, we must run aground on some island.'" So here they're afraid the whole time that the ship is going to be destroyed, that it's going to run aground if they stayed where they were. So they left, hoping to get ahead of the storms, and now they're right in the middle of it. And they're throwing everything off the ship. They're throwing the anchors, they're throwing everything that they use for fishing and catching food. They're throwing everything overboard, and they're starving. And now Paul tells them, "Don't worry, we're going to live. No matter how bad it seems, my God is here with us, and he has promised us that we're going to make it. Just don't lose faith." But we got to run aground. We got to do that one thing you were most afraid of doing. But once we do that, we're going to be okay. And that's a hard thing for a sailor to do. It's hard for a sailor to willingly destroy their ship. It's their vessel, it's their transportation, it's their livelihood. And they weren't cheap. They're still not cheap. But they got to purposely run this thing aground so that they can live. On the 14th night, 2 weeks, On the 14th night, we were still being driven across the Adriatic Sea, when about midnight the sailors sensed that they were approaching land. They took soundings and found that the water was 120 feet deep. A short time later, they took soundings again and found it was 90 feet deep. So they're quickly coming up on shore. Fearing that we would be dashed against the rocks, they dropped 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for daylight. In an attempt to escape from the ships, the sailors let the lifeboat down into the sea, pretending they were going to lower some anchors from the bow. Then Paul said to the centurion and the soldiers, "Unless those men stay with us, you cannot be saved." So the soldiers cut the ropes and held the lifeboats and let them drift away. Just before dawn, Paul urged them all to eat. For the last 14 days, he said, "You have been in constant suspense and have gone without food. You haven't eaten anything. Now I urge you, take some food. You need it to survive. Not one of you will lose a single hair from his head. The water is cold, the currents are strong, and when you go 2 weeks without eating, you're weak. You're physically weak." So he's urging them, take in some food, get something in your belly to make you warm and give you that energy, because we're going to be swimming in a few minutes, basically is what he's telling them. After he said this, he took some bread and gave thanks to God in front of them all. Then he broke it and began to eat. They were encouraged and ate some food themselves. Altogether, there were 276 of us on board. When they had eaten as much as they wanted, they lightened the ship by throwing the grain into the sea. When daylight came, they did not recognize the land, but they saw a bay with a sandy beach where they decided to run the ship aground if they could. Cutting loose the anchors, they left them in the sea and at the same time untied the ropes that held the rudders. Then they hoisted the foresail to the wind and made for the beach. But the ship struck a sandbar and ran aground. The bow stuck fast and would not move, and the stern was broken into pieces by the pounding of the surf. The soldiers planned to kill the prisoners to prevent any of them from swimming away and escaping, but the centurion wanted to spare Paul's life and kept them from carrying out their plan. He ordered those who could swim to jump overboard first and get to land. The rest were to get there on planks or on other pieces of the ship, and in this way, everyone reached safety. So the reason those soldiers wanted to kill the prisoners is if any of those prisoners escaped, whatever sentence they were under went to the soldiers. So we saw this with Paul being in prison, thinking that the jailer thought everybody had escaped and was ready to drop himself on his own sword. And Paul said, "Hold on, we're here. Don't go anywhere." And we see this repeatedly. But see, God had given them the grace and had given Paul the hope that every single person would be saved if they just stuck together. Now see, those pagans, the Gentiles, the Romans, they didn't have that assurance. They would make sacrifices and pray to Poseidon and other gods of the sea and hope that maybe something would take place, but they were never sure. Yet here we see Paul speaking with authority. My God has promised that we will all live. Paul is planting that seed of faith in these 276 souls. My God made a promise, and you're going to see this promise fulfilled. And when you're facing death, and yet you survive what should have killed you, it's hard not to let that faith grow when someone speaks with that kind of an authority. That's why those songs that I played earlier today, I did that because I wanted to share something that I find that gives me hope is listening to those songs and hearing someone else's faith played out. The song Talking to Jesus is one that has just hit me since the first time I heard it. If you listen to it, it's a man talking to his son, telling him that when he was younger, the boy's grandmother, this man's mother, would pray. And I don't know if you caught on to it, but she prayed in tongues. He said it sounded like gibberish. I couldn't understand anything she was praying, but she was praying the whole time. And it wasn't something that she only did at night or in the morning or on Sundays. It was something that she did continuously. When his child was born, she was right there praying over his children. Her faith was so strong that she encouraged to the point where she kind of made them go, but she made sure that her kids went to church every week and that they were exposed to Jesus Christ and what that relationship looked like. And then years later, when his son is 15, he's in his room praying. And from what the son says, it sounds like dad is doing that same thing that his mom did, where it's just that heart language that's coming out. Because the son walks in and goes, "Oh, I see you got a lot on your mind. You're busy. I'll come back." Dad doesn't say, "Okay, yeah, come back." He says, "No, this is perfect. Come on in. Because I want you to experience this as well. I want you to understand that being a Christian is not a religion. It's not ritual that you go through week in and week out. It's about having that relationship with Christ where you can talk to him like he's your father and you're his son." Paul is on this ship. The ship is in dire straits. Paul tried to warn them. Paul's not unfamiliar with ships. He's a sailmaker. He knows how the sails work. He knows what they can stand up to. So he knows the trouble they're facing. Yet here he comes after 2 weeks of just being beat up by the winds and the waves. And he says, "Guys, my God sent me an angel. And the angel told me that we're going to be okay. We just got to stick together. We're going to lose the ship." And that's scary to a sailor. But God's going to rescue us, and we're going to live. And we'll pick up on this story next week, but I want everybody to remember that Paul is facing an incredible amount of danger. Everybody there is fearful. The soldiers want to kill the prisoners rather than face a death sentence themselves. But Paul's calm. He doesn't get excited. His calm attitude will help others remain calm. And he tells them, "We're going to run aground. We're going to be swimming for our lives. We're going to make it, but right now I want you guys to eat. Replenish your energy. Get ready for that next trial that's going to come. It's going to be very short-lived, and we're going to make it through it, but it's going to be hard." And that's the same thing we face. We have trials in our lives. We have periods where we're up against something that just seems like we will never be able to overcome it. Yet, God, in his wisdom and grace, will continue to allow us to turn to him, to keep our eyes focused on him, and he will carry us through. Yesterday, Natalie and I were at that conference I told you about. And one of the things that they kept saying is that you're going to face trials no matter what. When you face those trials, look up and understand that God sees exactly what you're experiencing, but he also sees everything else. Look up and know that God sees you. Look up and know that God sees the future. Those trials either turn into perseverance because you're making it through, or it turns into crisis because something goes out of whack. No matter what, look up and know that God sees you, sees what you're going through, and God sees the future. And God's going to carry you through it, no matter how bad things get. Lord, I thank you for this opportunity. I thank you for the chances that you have given us. Lord, and I know that a lot of people don't understand this, but I thank you for the many blessings that you have given us, but I also thank you for the trials that you have given Natalie and I. Even though they're hard and difficult, and it seems like we're just beating our heads against a brick wall, Lord, we know that you are in control and that you will carry us through. And that's a powerful lesson, Lord, to just keep our focus on you and know that everything is in your will. When we try to interrupt that will, when we try to influence that will, Lord, that's when the bad stuff really starts to happen. So, Lord, I just ask that you would keep everyone's mind on you. Remind us all to look up in our trials and struggles. And even in the hard times, Lord, remind us to smile and know that you are indeed Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.